Good morning, trendsetters and innovators. This is Etienne, and I welcome you back for our next video interview. As some of you may have heard, trending topics and a big part of the Bulgarian tech community are co-creating the Big Reset conference, which goes under the motto From Crisis Mode to Entrepreneurial Mindset. For 4 days in 4 major tracks, we will discuss and explore innovation opportunities for our country and the region. And of our main topics is the future of work. Uh, the way we work was changing very fast, even before the corona crisis. But maybe all the recent events have further accelerated some things that were already happening, or maybe we'll see completely new trends emerge. So now the big question is, what lessons did we learn from the remote collaboration in the past almost 2 months about leadership, about teamwork, and about the new skills we maybe need to develop. To warm up for all these discussions, today we have invited Haralambi Haralambiev. He's the co-founder of Tochka and is focused on helping IT people develop their soft skills. Harry has about 14 years of experience in the Bulgarian software industry. He went through the roles of a programmer and a QA before establishing himself as a successful team leader. He has managed numerous projects for international clients and has been responsible for the development of innovative products. A noteworthy belief of his is that learning should be interesting and useful at the same time. So the soft skill training sessions at Tochka have been designed as a safe environment for people to learn through games, to experiment and make mistakes, to bring awareness and to practice. So without further ado, I want to give Harry the word. Hi, Harry. Thank you for joining us. And as I started talking about learning, I would like to ask you, what is something new you learned about leadership in the past, let's say, 2 months, with all the craziness going on, and since almost everyone switched to remote work? Was there something you decided to emphasize more as a leader yourself?
Thanks for having me, Etienne. Thanks for the introduction as well. I'll try to answer this question in two parts. First, for myself, and the other thing is what I've observed for leaders throughout this period. For myself, one of the things is that me and my team try to use this time where work is not happening in the normal way to actually use it for some creative projects that we're always trying to fit in our schedule, and now we have more time, and that was for us a great opportunity. So on one hand is for leaders to for me to try to first face the reality. It's not something we wanted, but it is the reality, to accept the reality and then to try to use the maximum from this one. And in terms of what I've observed and what I liked actually from what's happening is that leaders in this current environment are more often doing some activities to connect with people. In the day-to-day life before the lockdowns, it was hard for leaders to actually, let's say, accept that it is important. It is really important to have time and to allow people to connect, to talk. It was a lot of times focus on the work itself. And now, because of just going remote, and not only remote, we're in a lockdown, which is quite different. It's not something we chose to do. And that's why leaders are now focusing more on trying to connect with people, which even means sharing what they're doing daily, which in before times was not happening that much.
Right now, what are the fundamentals of connecting and social interactions, like the things we need to keep even if we're not meeting in person, like body language and handshakes evolve in the current situation?
What's important about connecting with people is actually sharing and being vulnerable. For example, a lot of people when connecting online, they're using, let's say, some more sterile places to do work. If you see my background, you can see that it's not some sterile background, it's my kids' wall. And actually things like this, if you don't use let's say Zoom backgrounds that are putting you in some other place and actually allow your kid to run around behind you, it will place you in a place that you're more vulnerable, because you're actually sharing something from your inner world or from your home. So things like this, they happen in great teams as well, even when they're co-located. So sharing something from your inner world is actually building stronger relationships, and this is something you should always keep.
And I know that your trainings at Tochka, they often feature games. Like, can you give us an example of a good game to maybe bond with the team and build trust when working remotely?
Yeah, we at Tochka, we're really focused on learning through play, so learning through interacting, and we like for people to have an environment to practice things, not only to hear about things. So it is about skills, and skills are learned by doing them, not only by hearing about them. In the context of teamwork, we often place teams in similar to real world environment, so that they act in their natural way. And more specifically about remote teams, I can give you an example with one of our games. It is called 3D communication, and it is funny when you the whole idea of the game is to have one team and physically separate them into two groups. Let's say two groups, physically they are not together, and to give them a common goal. And it is always surprising for me what happens when you just separate physically a group of people that are actually a good team. And what happens is that they tend to act as still two separate teams, and they become like fractions or enemies. There are a lot of issues going on when they have to do work. Who is responsible for one thing? Who is leading the other team, and so on. So there is a lot of conflicts going on when you just separate people into two physical locations. And that's why it is very important for remote teams to have even more emphasis on teamwork.
Without generalizing too much, I would say that like many people in the IT industry are not that used to socializing and working with people. Like, what is in your experience the best way for an introvert or someone with limited experience with social interaction to go about developing people skills?
Yeah, it is a common notion. Yeah, it's a generalization that IT people are not that good with people skills, and this is due to the fact that they desire to work with computers, not with people. The hard truth is that we're constantly doing work together. So you wish it or not, you're dealing with people and people issues constantly. I won't go that much into categorizing that IT people are more introverted. I myself consider myself as an introvert, and I'll give an example from my beginning of my career. I was, let's say, 3 months into the software business. It was 16 years ago, and a colleague of mine said to me after working with me for 2 months that I'm a shy guy who doesn't go anywhere and doesn't speak up and so on. And I've developed myself from this situation, and it is basically again by practicing all the time. And I'll give you a very small example of how I dealt with let's say my anxiety of working with people and speaking up. When I was a junior developer and entered the company, I wasn't saying hi to the colleagues. I was just going to my room and to my desk. At some point, I started to say hi to everyone, and it was in the beginning very, let's say, with low voice. It was hi. At some point, I started to practice saying hi and looking in the eyes of people, and it is very, very hard. But saying hi and saying good morning and looking through people's eyes is a great beginning for people to actually develop their people skills. But this is not something that you learn overnight. This is something you have to practice all the time. Even now, after also all those years, I have a lot of worries about interacting with people that I don't know, for example.
As you mentioned beginning, like what are the most frequent mistakes you observe people make when they decide that they want to learn a new people skill?
Well, the most common thing is, even now when I'm at Tochka, that we're training people for developing their people skills, is once you learn a new model, for example, a new way to look at things, it is crucial to actually practice it, to apply it. For example, if you learn that you're constantly doing mistakes about giving feedback, and you say, oh, okay, now I understand how to give proper feedback, but you don't actually do it. That's the most common mistake. The most common mistake is that people consider that reading about it is enough, learning about it as an information is enough, but it is really important to actually do it over time and to analyze it, what works, what's not working. Because soft skills and people skills, it is not an exact science. There are some guidances, but you always have to look at context, at individuals. It is, let's say, it's really not an exact science. You have to experiment a lot.
What are some instances of soft skills that are often ignored but are extremely important?
When communicating, people often don't try to really understand the other person's perspective, and you have a lot of conflicts going on because some person is thinking A and the other person is thinking B, and there is a clash of opinions but no attempt to understand the other side. And one of the most common, let's say, I won't say mistakes, but it is something that people don't do but actually have it has great impact, is to ask questions. It is basically to ask questions with the intent to understand the other person's perspective. Why do you think in this way? Not you're wrong. This is something. Just asking questions with the curiosity to understand the other person's perspective. Not to agree with this perspective, but to understand it.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. And I have one question that is relevant for entrepreneurs in general, but also about many other people in the current situation. In your experience, are there any good approaches for building personal resilience and developing a mindset for overcoming challenges?
First, I'll go through from my experience to share what I'm doing. What in terms of resilience, what I try to do, and I always keep reminding myself, is that you shouldn't evaluate the situation until it is, let's say, over, because a lot of times when we are during some situation, we think the worst is happening, but after it passes, you see that it's not the worst that could have happened. So one thing is to actually analyze things after they went by. So it is important when you do analysis and to actually do learning. So you look back and say, okay, I learned this from this situation. And there is one trick, but it depends on the person. And I'll give you it with an example. Consider that you're walking into a bank. Not now, but during normal times. Consider that you're walking into a bank. And what happens is that in this particular bank, there is a robbery, armed robbery, and from all the people that are in the bank, there are, let's say, 100. the robber actually pulls a gun and shoots you in the arm. So it's not a fatal wound, but it shoots you in the arm. So my question to you now is, what's the first thought about this situation? Is it a positive situation or a negative situation?
A negative one.
A negative one. What happens is, if you think, why of all the banks, of all the people, of all the times, it happened to me? Why? And this is, let's say, a negative approach about this situation. And the, let's say, more positive one is, okay, I'm not dead. It could have been worse. It could have been worse. A lot of people might have died, let's say. So there is some research that shows that in bad situation, if you look at them, it could have been worse, and think about a worse situation, it will make you more resilient. Again, it depends on people, but I've tried it myself to think how could have this situation been worse, and it actually makes me cope with this current situation better.
And yeah, I think you read a lot of research and what many innovative companies are doing. So maybe can you share any examples of what you found to be useful in fostering creative and innovative behavior?
I'll look at this question. I like questions about creativity. I'll look at it in two ways. First, individually, and then what companies or entrepreneurs could do. In terms of personal creativity, I think there are a few factors that you can do, or things you can do, to foster or trigger your creativity. The current situation is perfect actually for creativity, because you're put into a box. You have some of the people have, let's say, they're wondering what to do with their time. So the factor of being bored, that you're bored with what you're doing, it's great. So boredom is critical for creativity. It is really important. And for example, if you there's some ideas that parents should allow their kids more time to be bored, so that they can thrive more in terms of creativity. And there are two other aspects. So thinking within the box allows you to, if you fix your perspective in something. I'll give you an example with myself. I recently started doing a web comics for leadership. And so I said, I'll try to look at situations and leadership through the means of web comics. So whatever I see, I put this perspective into account. So I try to connect whatever the situation is with this particular perspective. So this is thinking within the box. IKEA had a principle that before they start doing some furniture, they fix their price for the product. So they say, okay, we are going to do some, let's say, table, functional table, but the price will be $150. So the designers have their box fixed. On the other side, you know the common saying, think out of the box. So thinking out of the box is basically to try to break your perspectives and allow yourself to see the world through different eyes. And this is basically for you to break your daily habits. Traveling, for example, is great for fostering creativity, because you're entering new worlds. You see things that you haven't seen. You experience things that you haven't experienced. But on a day-to-day basis, you can even break your normal habits. And I'll give you another example. If you go to work in one particular way, changing the way you go to work will actually help you be more creative. And now I'll go about the entrepreneurial side, or what companies can do. And I like, there are a lot of examples about creativity from Pixar as a company. There is a great book called Creativity Inc. from the founder of Pixar. And there are two things that I remember from the book that are important. One is how you organize your physical environment. It is very important about creativity. There was an enormous focus from Steve Jobs when they created the Pixar campus. The cafeteria that they created was particularly focused on making random interaction between people more often. So when you stumble upon a person in the hallway and just talk about something, this connects different perspectives and it could lead to something great. And another thing that it was very interesting for me is when Walt Disney bought Pixar. Pixar founders became head of the Walt Disney Animation Studios, and Walt Disney Animation Studios had issues in the past 20 years about producing great movies, great animation movies. And what happened is they introduced one thing that they did in Pixar, which was let's call it research or traveling. So before doing a movie, let's say an example with the movie Ratatouille, which Pixar made. All the staff went to Paris for 2 weeks just to walk around and make notes and make pictures and to experience food and so on and so on. And what happens is that when you put yourself into this environment, when you do the research beforehand, then when you're doing actually the work, creativity happens. You connect the dots.
Given that, for example, now you cannot, for example, travel that much or put yourself in all these different situations, do you think virtual reality can replace this or something else?
I think whatever puts you into exploration mode and exploring new things, it could be virtual reality, it could be books. Whatever the means for entering a new world is, I think it could lead to creativity. And for example, with books, if you read how people are doing things, let's say, I love reading how people are creating how screenwriters are creating movies. So how they do the scenarios within the movies. This is not something I will do, but the mechanism that they're explaining makes me wonder how I can apply this to my environment. Last December, I read a book about the creators of the game Doom. I don't know if you know it. It was very, very popular in the 90s. So they explained how they popularized the game Doom. And what I saw was marketing approach, which is something that is nowadays very common, but you just see things again from everything that is new for you. And this could lead to applying new stuff into your day-to-day work.
And one final question, going back to the concept of the future of work. You've met many IT companies and teams. Have you noticed any trends that are shaping the future workplace even before the crisis? And do you think the past 2 months have accelerated some tendencies or created new ones?
I hope that they will accelerate remote work, because remote work is not something new, especially in the IT world. However, a lot of leaders, a lot of CEOs have often been worried, what will happen if I don't see my people physically in the office and working in the office? Will they actually do the work? And now they have a case study for the past 2 months that they can actually see that work is done, and you don't need to supervise or over control things. And I really hope that the trend that was beforehand of doing remote work will continue, because there is for a lot of jobs there is no need for you to be physically co-located. If you're not physically co-located, there are a lot of issues about what we had discussed about connecting on a human level. There are a lot of issues, but if you work together with someone and you know this someone, then you can work from wherever you want. for example, with my team, for the past month and a half, we have seen us over Zoom and so on, and it actually is. It is. There is no difference. There is no difference. Actually, it could be even better to work from home at some points. So I really hope the trend for remote work will continue with a better speed, and I really think that companies will trust more their people now.
Thank you, Hari, for all the great insights and perspectives. Everyone else, don't forget to register for the Bickerset conference. Find the link in the description, and hope to see you from the 11th to 14th of May online at the Bickerset conference. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye.